Hey guys, I'm Urizi. This story is all about what if Naruto turns into a fox during a full moon. Pre-timescope, no Biju, Konoha is a village of ninjas who hunt demons. Naruto is a ninja with secrets. And tonight is the night of a full moon. Before we proceed with the story, please like and subscribe to this channel if you liked the video, and don't forget to check the description for the other works of the author if you liked the story. Let's start. Chapter 25, Fragile Soul. At noon on the fifth day, the test was over. Several Umbu swept through the forest of death to locate and escort out the surviving losers. Those who had made it into the tower with the two boxes and all of their team members within the time limit were herded together to hear what would be expected of them next. Naruto was practically bouncing with excitement as Team 7 followed the other early finishing teams down a few flights of stairs. Getting out of the forest early had let him shower and get good food and sleep in a real bed. Thoroughly refreshed and energized, he was more than ready to face the next challenge. Sasuke and Sakura were more subdued. The Uchiha hadn't said much after he'd been returned to them and had spent most of his time sleeping. Sakura spent most of her time fussing over Sasuke, annoying the heck out of Sasuke, and it seemed that she'd forgotten all about how Naruto had been possessed in the Forest of Death, much to Naruto's relief. They were led into a large room made of concrete with a high ceiling and a pit sunk into the floor, leaving a few feet of walkway all the way around. It appeared to be an underground arena of sorts, hinting at some kind of combat test. At one end of the fighting field was a large statue of a pair of hands making the ram seal, and high up on the walls was a large, dark television screen. The Chunin overseeing them directed all of the teams down into the arena where they stood in lines according to their squads. "Was this where they took you when we got here?" Naruto whispered to Sasuke. "No," Sasuke growled in a tone that discouraged any further conversation. Another set of doors opened and admitted the Hokage, a pair of Umbu bodyguards, and several other Jonin. They took up spectator positions all around the rail, while two people descended the stairs to talk with them. The proctor, Anko, also appeared along with a sickly-looking man wearing a sword strapped to his back. Anko looked grim, or just cranky, Naruto really couldn't tell. She counted the teams and then really looked pissed. "I was hoping the forest would thin you out a bit more," she snorted. "Oh well. Okay you brats, congratulations, you've survived. Now only one trial separates you from the big event, so listen up." She stepped back and the ill man with the sword shifted closer, muffling a cough. "I am Gecko Hayate," the man wheezed, "and I will be the proctor for this section of the trials. From this point forward, your squads are dissolved. It is every genin for themselves. The trial will be a tournament where the computer," he gestured to the dark screen, "will select two names at random and those two genin will fight. The loser will be eliminated and the winner will proceed to the final trial. Any genin who feels that they cannot continue may withdraw now." A single hand went up and Naruto blinked when he recognized the Kabuto guy that had been so free with information at the start of the first trial. "Is it alright if I stay and watch the matches?" the genin with glasses asked politely. "Sure," Hayate coughed and waved him back up to the observation level. When no other genin forfeited, the sickly proctor continued. "The matches will continue until one participant is unable to continue fighting, one forfeits, or I stop the match. Killing isn't forbidden, but it is not encouraged. Observers may cheer on a favorite, but they cannot help or give advice or they will be disqualified." He paused to cough for a bit and then looked over the collection of genin. "Any questions?" No one spoke up and he gestured for them to go back up the stairs. "The computer will pick the first names in 5 minutes, he told them. Be ready." When Naruto climbed the stairs, he spotted Kakashi among the adult spectators and rushed over to stand by him. Kiba's team and Shikamaru and Chuji's team had made it through, too, and clustered around their senseis, a woman with black hair and red eyes for Kiba, and a man with a beard and a cigarette for Shikamaru and Chuji. Bushy-browed Lee's team had also defeated the forest and joined up with their sensei, who could have been Lee's father for how creepily similar they looked. The Oto team that he'd terrorized with Cuba-powered skulked over to a creepy older teen, or perhaps a short adult, with white hair, red dots over his eyes, and red markings under his eyes. Kabuto's teammates stood by him, but no sensei stood with them. And the Taki team that Naruto had robbed was also sensei-less, and the Kunoichi seemed to recognize him with the way that she was glaring at him from across the room. Hey, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto grinned, focusing on his masked teacher. Come to watch us kick butt. Sure, the Jonin agreed, crinkling his eye a bit in amusement. He glanced over his 3 students. So, you made it through with time to spare. Sakura nodded. Yeah, 'cause we're awesome. Naruto cheered. Sasuke said nothing. Good, Kakashi said, looking even more amused. After the tournament I'd like to hear all about it. Naruto felt a prickle along his spine. All about it? If they shared all their stories all at once, Naruto would have to remember to lie about how he'd tricked the Tokinin for their extra box and then tell Kakashi-sensei the truth later. Then there was that creepy Natsukunin, Orochimaru, with the snakes and whatever he'd done to Sasuke. With how Anko had reacted to hearing about the evil Hiki, it didn't seem like Kakashi-sensei would be much happier learning about it. And then there was the Kyuubi. A digital ping distracted Naruto from his worries and he looked to see the screen flashing through a blur of names to determine the first matchup. The blonde boy immediately shelved his earlier thoughts in favor of getting excited about whether or not he would be first up. When he was chosen, who would he fight? After what felt like forever, the computer settled on Uchiha Sasuke vs Akadu Yoruichi. Lucky bastard, Naruto pouted. Hurry up and beat him so that I can get a turn. Good luck, Sasuke-kun. Sakura said. Do your best, Kakashi advised. And be careful. I heard about that little souvenir you picked up. Was Sasuke's only response as he headed for the stairs to face off against one of Kabuto's mysterious teammates. Naruto hung onto the railing and stared down into the arena, tense with anticipation. Sasuke had better make this a cool fight. Hinata stood at the railing with her teammates and sensei, her focus fading with each successive fight. With every matchup, her dread grew as she wasn't selected by the computer and her pool of possible opponents steadily shrank. And then there was Kiba. Her canine-loving teammate hadn't seemed himself for days. When they reached the safety of the tower, she'd tried to suggest that he seek out a doctor, but he'd always brush her off. Shino had eventually joined her side, but too late as they were summoned for the preliminary tournament before either of them could persuade Kiba to do anything. She'd peek at him out of the corner of her eye in the lulls between fights. His skin had a gray tinge to it and there were dark shadows under his bloodshot eyes. There was a foul smell on his breath, something that reminded her of rotten fish and road tar that was strong enough for her to smell several feet away when he spoke. The Inuzuka sagged against the rail as if he was drunk and seemed quite oblivious to his small puppy that cowered anxiously by his feet. Kiba-kun. Commotion down in the arena stole Hinata's attention away from Kiba's profile to see that Shikamaru had somehow defeated his opponent, the Kunoichi, Kin, from Oto. As she hadn't been paying much attention to the match, she had no idea how the Nara boy had managed it. But judging from the spectators' reactions, it had been impressive in some way. The first battle between Sasuke and the older Konoha genin, Yoruichi, had been moderately exciting, but brief. The young Uchiha had used his Sharingan to avoid Yoruichi's chakra draining technique and while dancing out of the way had employed wires to trip him up. With a few more blows, the fight was over and Sasuke was the winner. The second battle had been even faster, and far more shocking. Shino had been pitted against the injured Oto genin, Zaku. Hinata had wondered what had happened to the boy's arm for it to be so heavily wrapped in bandages, but mostly she'd been glad that Shino wouldn't be fighting her. If she was set against either of her teammates, she felt she'd have no choice but to forfeit. With a little misdirection and a bit of stalling, Shino had plugged up the tubes set into Zaku's arms with his bugs, and when the other boy had tried to fire them his arms exploded. The hand of his injured arm was actually blown off due to being weakened from its earlier damage. The third match had been between the older Konoha genin, Misumi, and Itachi genin, Shin. It had been rough, and rather bloody as the Tokinin favored using long combat knives, one in each hand. Both combatants had looked evenly matched for a while, but Shin had come out on top, leaving Misumi to be carried off by medics. After that, Sakura and Ino had been chosen by the computer to fight. Considering their rivalry from the academy, their fight had been brutal. After Ino's attempt at ending the match quickly with her mind control jutsu had failed, it had devolved into a seemingly endless taijutsu battle that had lasted for nearly an hour, far longer than any of the previous fights. In the end, both kunoichi managed to knock each other out with simultaneous punches, so neither proceeded on. Another kunoichi on kunoichi match followed Tenten against the Takinen, Hisa. Hinata had expected her cousin's teammate to easily win. The brunette had a real talent with sharp projectiles and astounding accuracy, and with several relatives in the weapons business she had access to a lot of exotic things at rock-bottom prices. But the Taki girl came out on top by using genjutsu to make Tenten aim for the wrong spot and keep her distracted just long enough for Hisa to take her out from behind. And then Shikamaru had been chosen to fight Kin. Now the computer screen was sifting through the names again. Hinata clutched the railing with a death grip as she watched. There weren't many names left to choose from. She could be picked along with the last Otonin, the last Takinen, Naruto of Team 7, Kiba of her own team, Lee or Hyuga Hinata vs Hyuga Neji. A cold clammy feeling settled over Hinata as she stared, transfixed. She had dreaded being pitted against either of her teammates, Shino or Kiba. But this was much, much worse. She was going to lose. Many times she'd been put up against her cousin during her training and every single time he'd defeated her with minimal effort. There was no chance at all of her winning this fight. Yet somehow she found herself down in the arena facing him. She had no memory of leaving the rail or walking down the stairs. Perhaps Kurenye-sensei had given her a shove and she'd just done as she was told out of shock. If her teammates or sensei had said anything to her, she hadn't heard a word of it. Neji regarded her with his usual disdain, and even though she'd seen it countless times before, she shivered. "What are you doing here, Hinata-sama?" he asked coldly, his gray-white eyes flat and frigid. "Do you honestly believe that you can defeat me?" I. She gasped in almost a whisper. "We have sparred many times, and every time I have defeated you. This will not be a spar. I will fight with all my strength and hold nothing back. Do you believe you can win when I do not pull my punches?" Hinata flinched at the truth of his words, but felt paralyzed by his white gaze. "You are a failure, Hinata-sama. You cannot hope to overcome me. The only hope you have of victory is to use the power that the head family has over the branch family, and you cannot even bring yourself to do that, can you?" he asked contemptuously. Tears started to prickle at the back of her eyes. No matter what the situation was, she could never bring herself to activate the seal on her cousin's forehead even though her father had taught her how to. She remembered seeing the agony that her uncle had suffered from a brief activation and she had no desire to ever see it again. "Your weakness shames our clan," Neji said. "Forfeit now so that you do not shame the Hyuga any more than you do merely by existing." Neji was right. Her weakness harmed the Hyuga clan's reputation of strength. Forfeiting now would be less disappointing to her father than. "Shut up, you damn bully." Hinata jumped and glanced up at the spectators in shock. Naruto was glaring down at Neji, his face twisted in rage. The orange-clad boy looked about ready to leap over the railing and attack her cousin. "Hinata will kick your butt," Naruto declared. Her cousin was unmoved at Naruto's outburst. It was as if he didn't hear it at all. He just kept staring at Hinata, waiting. "Forfeit or fight," Neji said. "Either way, the outcome will be the same. It is your fate as a failure." The Hyuga girl hesitated and then slowly raised a trembling hand. "IW withdraw." "All right," the proctor coughed. "Hyuga Hinata forfeits. Hyuga Neji is the winner." Hinata hurried back to the stairs, her gaze fixed on the tile floor. When she reached her team she kept her eyes down. She couldn't bear to see the looks on their faces. "That was a bad matchup," Kurenye-sensei said, resting a hand on Hinata's shoulder. "If only the computer had picked a different name." "It doesn't matter," the girl thought, hugging herself. "I'm a failure. No matter who I fought, I would lose." She risked glancing over at Naruto, whose team happened to be on the same side of the arena, and cringed at the angry posture of his body. "It's my fate." Naruto was pissed. He hated bullies. Watching Neji tear apart the already terrified Hinata was like reliving a dozen other episodes in a dozen other places, including when he'd been small and his cousins and other young relatives had gleefully tormented him by repeating the awful things that their parents said about him and his mother, and then some. If Kakashi-sensei hadn't had a strong hand clamped on his shoulder, Naruto probably would have gone after Neji and ripped his head off. That jerk. Naruto hissed, glaring daggers at the older boy who was walking calmly back up to his spot with his team. That wasn't fair. Unfortunately, there are no rules against what he did, Kakashi-sensei told him quietly. If she'd been facing a rogue hunter or an intelligent demon, her hesitation would have gotten her killed. But that jerk isn't a demon, he's supposed to be some kind of relative. Naruto snarled. Try not to let it get to you, his sensei sighed. You could be up next. I wonder what happened for Neji to treat her that way, Sakura murmured. It's probably nothing, Sasuke muttered. The Hyuga are crazy. I'm gonna get that guy, Naruto growled, strangling the railing with his hands. You can't touch him right now, he's already had his fight, Sasuke told him. I'll get him later then, the blonde amended. That bastard needs to get beat up bad. The Hyuga aren't on the level of the Uchiha, but Neji is still way out of your league, Sasuke snorted. Doesn't matter, I'll pound him anyway, Naruto declared. Yeah, sure, Sasuke scoffed. Hey, Naruto, Sakura said, bumping his shoulder. You're up next. The whiskered boy blinked and looked up at the screen. Naruto vs Inuzuka Kiba. Oh, Naruto grunted and peeled himself away from the rail to take his turn. After weaving his way through the other spectators and taking up his spot down in the arena, he looked back up for Neji's team. Neji himself looked almost bored in his spot at the rail. However, his teammates, Lee and Tenten, kept a pointed distance from him. And the crazy Lee-like guy sensei looked somber and disappointed. I'll get you, jerk. He thought as his eyes passed over Neji's blank face again. Once I come up with something, I'm going to teach you a lesson you'll never forget. That silent promise made, Naruto turned his attention to his opponent. Kiba? The Inuzuka boy looked awful. He looked sick, or like he was drunk. Kiba stumbled and staggered a bit as he slowly approached. Akamaru slunk anxiously after him, little tail tucked between his legs. You look like crap, Naruto told him. You look like a cat, Kiba countered, narrowing his bloodshot eyes. I don't like cats. I'm not a cat, dog breath. Naruto snapped. It was a long-running insult. Kiba looked at the marks on Naruto's face and thought of cat whiskers, even though he freely admitted that Naruto didn't really smell like a feline at all. And no matter how often it got thrown at him, it still annoyed the heck out of Naruto. Okay, the proctor wheezed. You know the rules. Start whenever you're ready. Good. Kiba's grin only heightened the impression that he was drunk. I've been ready to kick some tail for days. Whatever, Naruto snorted, folding his arms over his chest. Send your puppy away so we can fight. I'd hate for the fluff ball to get mangled. Kiba blinked sluggishly and then glanced down at Akamaru like he'd totally forgotten that he had a pet. That made Naruto frown. Ever since Kiba had gotten his shaggy puppy, the pair had been inseparable. The two of them hung out with each other more than they ever did with Kiba's classmates, and somehow getting a puppy made the Inuzuka think that he was all that. Naruto had been rather annoyed at his pal's sudden jerkiness, but with Shikamaru and Chuji still willing to hang out with him he hadn't minded too much. Beat it, Kiba told the little dog. K Kiba. Akamaru yelped. But we fight together. We're a team. I said beat it. Kiba snarled. I don't need your help to trounce this loser. Kiba. I said go. The little white-furred canine whimpered pitifully and slunk off to sit near one of the arena walls, trembling and looking supremely sad and pathetic. Geez, I said send him away, not traumatize him, Naruto said, eyeing Kiba with a hint of worry. Are you okay? You look sick. I'm fine. Kiba snapped, glaring at him. Why does everybody think I'm sick? Because you look wasted. Naruto suggested. I'll kill you, cat boy. The Inuzuka roared, sliding into a sloppy taijutsu stance. I'll disembowel you and eat your intestines. For the millionth time, I'm not a cat. Naruto snapped. The longer he interacted with Kiba, the more certain he was that there was something wrong with the wild boy. He looked sick. He acted sort of sick. He didn't like his puppy anymore. And now he was making violent, gross threats that he didn't think Kiba would ever say. Get ready. Kiba formed a few hand seals, and he seemed to change. His fingernails grew out into claws and his canines lengthened into fangs, and he generally looked a bit more bestial than normal. The Inuzuka lowered himself into a four-legged stance and sneered. Here I come, kitty boy. I'm not oof. Kiba slammed into his gut with freakish speed and didn't let up. He slashed at Naruto with his claws, darting in and out on all fours like a freaky human animal. Naruto tried to get a move in edgewise, but Kiba was fast, relentless, and vicious. What the hell? Naruto stumbled backwards, nearly tripping as he dodged a blow that could have opened up his cheek. When did Kiba turn part werewolf? Kakashi stared over the railing as he watched Naruto struggle with his opponent. He was puzzled and concerned with Kiba's behavior. The Jonin had no personal experience with the boy, but he knew the general character of the Inuzuka clan very well, and this didn't fit at all. It looks like Naruto's going to lose, Sakura frowned, rubbing at a sore spot on her shoulder. Kiba's bigger, and he's so much faster. Sasuke said nothing, his dark gaze intent on the fight unfolding below. It doesn't look good for your student, Kurenai commented as she and her two other students moved closer to Kakashi's chosen spot. Perhaps he should withdraw. Oh, I think Naruto will surprise you, Kakashi replied casually. Or, were you hoping that Naruto would give up easily so that you could get Kiba looked at by the medics? We encouraged Kiba to seek medical attention, Shino volunteered, adjusting his round shades. He refused. Why? We do not know. Kurenai pressed her lips together for a moment before responding. Yes, I do wish for the fight to be over quickly so that Kiba can be looked at. Naruto won't quit easily, Kakashi shrugged as he watched the blonde get smacked down to the tile floor. And should Kiba really need a doctor, Hayate will stop the fight. So try and relax, and we'll see whose student is stronger. Naruto can win, the silver-haired Jonin mused as he leaned against the railing. The question is, how will he do it? Will he improvise a winning strategy, or will he tap into his unique abilities? Chapter 26, Dog vs. Fox. Kurenai watched Kiba's fight with mounting concern. Refusing to let Akamaru battle with him was something he'd never done before. And now he was attacking like a wild animal, no smoke bombs, no strategy, just attack after attack. The only jutsu he'd used so far was the clan technique that heightened his feral features and senses. She wished that he'd exhibited more signs of ill health beforehand so that he wouldn't have been allowed to participate. If Kiba hadn't been able to stand or had been vomiting before the match, Hayate wouldn't have let it even start. Or if Kiba's mild coordination problems had persisted instead of vanishing as the boys had started fighting, Hayate would have stepped in and declared Naruto the winner. But with the match started, there was nothing she could do, as much as she wanted to. If she intervened and forced the match to end, she would hurt Kiba's score far more than if he was defeated or if he willingly forfeited. Not knowing exactly what was wrong with her student, she couldn't justify crippling his chances for promotion to herself. So she stood by and worried, along with most of the other adults present. Every Konohanin from Kiba's old classmates to the Hokage himself looked unhappy as they watched the fight play out. They knew Kiba wasn't acting right for an Inuzuka. Only the foreign ninjas were left in the dark. It seems that Kakashi is right about his student, she thought as she watched Naruto roll to his feet after a nasty blow and keep going despite the beating he'd taken so far. He won't quit easily, but I wish that he would. The sooner this fight ends the better. Naruto wheezed as Kiba slammed into his side and sent the blonde skidding along the tile floor of the indoor arena. Before he'd even come to a full stop, Kiba was on him again, slashing towards his throat and chest. The boy in orange was able to slap the Inuzuka's claws away and roll to his feet to try and keep fighting. Kiba never fought like this back in the academy, Naruto thought as he tried to trip the bigger boy up, only for Kiba to jump out of range and then dash around to strike at him from another angle. He just isn't letting up. I need to do something before he makes me Akamaru's new chew toy. Desperate to get a little breathing room, Naruto twisted around and caught Kiba's next slashing blow that had been aimed at his side and then kicked out at the Inuzuka's face. The kick made Kiba's nose bleed and probably broke it, but the bigger boy barely flinched and simply lashed out with his free hand. All the nose injury really seemed to do was make Kiba breathe out of his mouth more, which forced Naruto to smell more of his nasty breath. Dude, breath mints. Naruto coughed as he reeled away from Kiba's next series of strikes, and the nasty odor coming from his mouth. What did you eat out in the forest, dead animals? Quit running away, scaredy cat. Kiba barked, completely ignoring Naruto's jibe. Hold still so I can rip you to pieces. Why the heck would I hold still for that? Naruto squawked, nearly falling over as he bent backwards to avoid taking a hit to the head. Kiba made no reply, the canine lover just kept dashing in and out and in at various angles. With his fur-lined jacket, claws, fangs, bloodshot and shadowed eyes, and now with a bloody nose, he was like a rabid demon hound, fixated completely on tearing apart his prey. It was like some psycho had crawled into his buddy's skin. Hey, Kiba, did you miss your rabies shot this year? The blonde asked as he hurled a few shuriken, which missed the mark completely. Semir. Kiba roared, launching into a spin that, combined with chakra and dust, turned him into a sideways tornado drill. Yelping, Naruto barely vaulted over the attack in time. Holy crap! Undeterred by the miss, Kiba went back to dashing around on all fours and bouncing off walls to lash out at his foe from all sorts of angles. Naruto tried to keep up, but Kiba's speed and the numerous stinging cuts and bruises that he'd accumulated were slowly wearing him down. And then Naruto found himself with his back to one of the arena walls with Kiba bearing down on him like a guided missile. Gotcha now, kitty face. Kiba howled, spinning himself into another tornado drill as he closed in. Naruto scrambled right, just missing being ground into the wall by Kiba's attack. As he skirted the wall, he almost tripped over Akamaru, who still cowered in the spot where he'd been banished earlier. He ducked down to scoop up the little white puppy. Kiba soared just inches over Naruto's stooped back, missing his target and skidded a few yards before whirling around with a feral grin. Here kitty, kitty. Enough with the cat stuff. Naruto snapped and held up the puppy so that Kiba could see him. I got Akamaru. Now what are you gonna do, huh? Who cares about that stupid hairball? Kiba laughed and galloped into another charge. Just die. Kiba. Akamaru whined piteously as Naruto tucked the puppy under his arm and sidestepped the Inuzuka's next charge. What's wrong with you? What the hell? Naruto yelped. Just die? The Inuzuka lunged again and Naruto managed to whip out one of his kunai and cracked the blunt ring end into Kiba's hip. Again the bigger boy didn't seem to feel any pain, but he was knocked off balance and he stumbled hard. When Kiba tried attacking again, Naruto managed another glancing blow, slicing Kiba's weapon pouch off more by luck than by design. Holding his kunai with his teeth, and still awkwardly cradling Akamaru with his left arm, he snatched up Kiba's dropped pouch and dumped it out, hoping to find something he could use. There were a bunch of kunai, of course, along with a roll of bandages, a bottle of some kind of pills, and a couple of small smoke bombs. Naruto crouched down to grab the spherical smoke bombs. Kiba slammed into his back, pinning him down onto the tile floor and almost crushing Akamaru in the process. Gotcha! Kiba growled and wrapped his fingers around the back of Naruto's neck. Your cat food. Naruto spat the kunai from his mouth and growled, what the heck is it with you and calling me a cat? And then he grasped the smoke bombs, squeezed them, channeled chakra through them, and they went off. Thick black smoke boiled out and quickly blinded all three of them. Naruto took advantage of the distraction and bucked Kiba off before diving out of the smoke with the puppy. Kiba didn't seem to be able to find his way out. Where are you, you coward? Come out and fight me. Naruto slowly edged away from the pall of smoke and took the opportunity to catch his breath. What's wrong with Kiba? He mumbled. I don't know, Akamaru moaned. We were stalking something out in the forest and then something happened, I didn't see. He's been different. His breath smells bad. Kiba's not right. Naruto watched the said little puppy from the corner of his eye. I hear a dog barking. Kiba growled darkly from inside the smoke cloud. Kiba, let's talk, the puppy pleaded. Tell me what happened, I can help. I don't think he's interested, Naruto almost whispered and set the puppy down by his feet. Something was very wrong with Kiba. He looked wrong, he acted wrong, he smelled wrong. Naruto knew that the fight needed to be ended fast so that whatever was wrong with Kiba could be fixed, but the proctor didn't seem to think it was dire enough to stop the fighting, and Naruto wasn't about to just forfeit, not when he could win. It's worth the risk, he decided. Kiba's my friend. No more holding back. Kiba was blind with rage more than he was from the smoke. The pipsqueak had wriggled loose just when he'd been about to win. That was unforgivable. He was going to rip the boy in orange into 1,000 pieces and then spit on him. And then he'd work on that annoying fur ball. Then he'd go after everyone else, one by one. He'd show them his power. His insides burned and churned, and he felt more alive and energized than he ever had before. His pulse pounded in his ears, making it difficult to hear anything. The thick smoke choked his sense of smell, already greatly diminished by his broken, bleeding nose. He didn't feel quite balanced, but that was all right. He'd find his way out of the smoke screen eventually. And then Naruto would die. Groping his way through the dark smoke, he finally emerged into clear air, with his target directly in front of him. This is the end. Kiba crowed in wild delight and galloped at his opponent. He was done toying with his prey. The blonde moron was thoroughly tenderized. Now it was time to go in for the kill. The mad Inuzuka leapt for his foe's bowed head, claws outstretched, ready to rip his skull from his shoulders. Catboy caught both his wrists and halted his charge, barely sliding back an inch from the force of Kiba's momentum. The bestial boy scowled, and gawked when he noticed that the loser's fingernails had turned claw-like. When the smaller boy lifted his head to stare Kiba in the eye, the Inuzuka was startled to see the thin kitty whiskers had thickened into tigerish stripes, he had small fangs poking out of his mouth, and his blue eyes had developed narrow feline pupils. "Hey, Kiba, guess what?" The orange-clad clown spoke in a low, sing-song tone. "Anything you can do, I can do better." And then he slammed his forehead into Kiba's face. Sasuke immediately noticed when it happened when the direction of the fight flipped around. The first half of the fight Naruto had been kicked around and chased around and completely on the defensive. And then all of a sudden he was able to stop Kiba cold, when before a charge like that would have knocked him halfway across the arena. What the? He activated his Sharingan to better watch the fight and to memorize what happened in the rest of the fight. His red spinning eyes focused on the two boys and the cowering puppy, everything appearing to happen in slow motion. He didn't have a good view of Naruto's face, but from Kiba's sickly, twisted expression, he was seeing something unexpected. And then Naruto whispered some taunt and head-butted Kiba hard enough to almost knock him down. The puppy whined and slunk off to take shelter by the unhealthy-looking proctor. Then the fight between the two boys exploded. Before Kiba had the advantage of speed, strength, and size over Naruto. Now Naruto was faster and his hits had more force behind them. The only thing Kiba had left on his side was his greater size and reach and the fact that he'd done some damage to Naruto earlier in the fight. Naruto seemed to be mimicking Kiba's bestial taijutsu style. He was running on all fours like Kiba and delivering slashing blows, with claws. And the hell? Sasuke's eyes widened as he caught a glimpse of Naruto's face. The faint whisker-like markings were dark and broad. There were fangs in his mouth and his eyes, they weren't human anymore. He looked more feral than Kiba did when he'd activated his clan jutsu. Is this how he beat that Kirinin back in Wave? He gripped the metal railing and focused on the battle unfolding below him, ignoring the shocked and confused whispers of the other spectators wondering where he'd gotten all that strength from. Father will want to hear about this. Naruto matched Kiba move for move. When Kiba tried to get the drop on Naruto by running on the wall, Naruto just took the fight up the wall to him. When Kiba tried to circle around and attack from behind, Naruto did the same to him by moving even faster. When Kiba ran on all fours, so did Naruto. When Kiba made slashing strikes, so did Naruto. He copied everything that Kiba did, except for that spinning tornado drill move, and did it faster and better. You really are a cat, Kiba wheezed, finally seeming to feel the blows that he'd taken. Dogs eat cats, you know. Beyond annoyed with Kiba's fixation on him being a cat, Naruto sped in to hopefully deliver the finishing blows. He slammed a fist into Kiba's cheek. Not. He punched Kiba's right shoulder. He hooked his left fist into Kiba's side. Cat. And he finished it off with a blow to Kiba's gut that left the boy doubled over and collapsed on his knees. Would you get that fact through your head? Kiba didn't answer, he just coughed and wheezed, and then he spewed. Eeyah! Naruto grimaced and hopped back a few steps. Gross. What the hell did you eat? It was black and viscous like molten roof tar, and it somehow managed to smell twice as bad as Kiba's breath. And since Naruto had tapped into some of his lycanthropic power, his sense of smell was on par with a dog's, which made it that much worse. His eyes were watering and he was rather tempted to puke himself. After he'd finished heaving and retching, Kiba flopped onto his side and fainted. The proctor saw that he was incapacitated and walked over to check him. Akamaru moved faster and arrived first to paw at Kiba's shoulder and whine. Kiba! Kiba, wake up! Kiba! Naruto tried not to gag as he focused on reversing the minor transformation so the smell wouldn't be so bad. The sickly Jonin with the sword shuffled over to Kiba's side and checked his pulse. Nodding at whatever he found, he straightened up to give his official announcement. The nasty black bearf moved. It quivered, drew in on itself to almost form a sphere that was roughly the size of a small beach ball, and then it started rolling, right at Naruto. And it accelerated very quickly. Wah! Naruto cried and took off running. It followed him, and got even faster. What, is that what got Kiba? Akamaru yipped, tilting his head. Naruto put on a burst of speed, jumped into the air, spun around, and hurled one of his kunai at it. The throwing knife went right through the middle of the black blob, but it was barely disrupted and it quickly got back up to speed. What? The proctor swooped in with his sword drawn and sliced the freaky glob 8 times in about 5 seconds, splattering it in all directions. It didn't stay dispersed very long as the various little pieces immediately started slithering back together. The sickly swordsman coughed a few times and glanced towards Naruto, who was watching the freaky black goo with morbid fascination. You win, congratulations. Now go back to the observation deck. He coughed and adjusted his grip on his weapon as he eyed the evil ooze. Umbu will take care of this. Naruto didn't need to be told twice and made a mad dash for the stairs, giving the black nastiness a wide berth. He slipped on the steps twice and almost fell, and then almost bowled Shikamaru over in his haste to return to his sensei's side. There he collapsed and tried to catch his breath, secretly checking his teeth with his tongue to make sure that he'd gotten rid of his feral features. That was sick. Nice freak out down there, dead last, Sasuke mocked. Naruto glared at the Uchiha. Oh? What would you do if someone's BRF tried to attack you, huh? I would have set it on fire, was Sasuke's cool response. The blonde genin huffed and looked away, back down into the arena. Maybe I should have done that. The two Umbu that had flanked the Hokage had temporarily left the village leader to be guarded by the various nearby Konoha Chunin and Jonin, and were pinning the black thing down with a turbulent water jutsu. Meanwhile, Kiba was being loaded onto a stretcher by the medic nin and was hastily carted away through the hidden door down in the arena. Akamaru chased after them, determined to stick with his partner. The cavernous room was eerily still as the two masked ninja. One mask had a frog face painted on it, the other had wispy gray patterns that suggested spider webs forced the black entity, mixed with the small water jutsu, into some kind of special storage scroll. The frog-masked Umbu took the scroll and left while his companion returned to the Hokage's side. At a nod from the Hokage, the tournament proceeded and the computer started sorting through the last few names. That was intense. Naruto sighed and relaxed, glad that the animated black puke was gone, and that his match was over, and he'd won. If only Kiba hadn't been sick, or whatever, it would have been better. I hope that no one got a good look at me when I got serious. Sasuke edged closer to Naruto and quietly asked, so, is that how you won in Nami no Kuni? Crap. I don't think so, Sakura commented, standing on the other side of Naruto, glancing down at him nervously. It sort of reminded me of what he did in the Forest of Death when that awful chakra from the Kitsune skeleton possessed him. Double crap. Naruto could feel Kakashi looming over him, although his eyes were fixed on the screen that was declaring that Rock Lee was going to be fighting the final Takinin, Taro. He also had the feeling that Team 8 on the left and Team 10 on the right were watching him, too, but he didn't want to look. What happened to Naruto? I am in so much trouble. Sarutobi Hiruzen did his best to give the final 2 matches of the Forest of Death tournament his full attention. Rock Lee's match against the last member of the Tokinin had been quick and decisive as his taijutsu skills far outstripped Taro's use of weaponry and ninjutsu. And the final match Akimichi Chuji vs Kinyuta Dosu had ended even more quickly, with the Oto Genin simply dodging Chuji's human boulder form until the chubby Genin got stuck and then used sound waves to incapacitate him. With all the winners decided, the old Hokage made his way down to the arena floor where Enko was having all the survivors pick numbered slips of paper from a cup. Each of the genin announced which number they'd drawn and Hayate recorded it on a clipboard. Hiruzen waited a few more beats before taking a step forward and giving the speech that he gave every year. "Congratulations all of you," he said, instantly drawing their attention. "You have all seen through deception, you have survived the wild, and you have proven your strength against your fellow ninja. Now only one test remains. 1 month from today, you will fight in the main arena and slay a selection of lesser demons for the chance of promotion to Chunin." "Why a month?" Naruto complained, speaking out of turn. "I was just getting to that, be patient," the Hokage lightly scolded, giving the orange-clothed genin a warning glance. "This will be a public event where village civilians along with dignitaries from far and wide. The month-long period allows plenty of time for all of the honored guests to make their way to Konoha. Also, during this time, the demons that you will be fighting will need to be collected. Use this month wisely," he advised them. "Train to refine and expand your skills, you'll need them to defeat your foes and earn the right to be promoted. The numbers that you have drawn determine the order in which you will fight, so keep that in mind when you make your final preparations. You will not know what demon or demons you will face, but rest assured it will be nothing more serious than a C-class species." He looked over the line of young Chunin hopefuls one last time before dismissing them. "Go now and do your best. You will be escorted back to the village through underground tunnels. I will see you all in the stadium in 1 month's time." The genin bowed to him and dispersed. Hiruzen left the arena ahead of all of them with his remaining Umbu escort trailing after him like a solid shadow. He and the proctors and observers would have a meeting that evening to draw up a list of the demons that Konoha needed to acquire for the final trial. He also needed to be updated on village security as Orochimaru had been spotted earlier, but the reptile Hanyu's current location remained unknown. And he needed to get more information on the genin affected by the mysterious black substance. He knew that Kiba and the dead Hoshi genin weren't the only victims. "Spider," he said to the Umbu as they traversed one of the tunnels that ran underneath the forest, "alert Mangetsu that the preliminary tournament is completed and that he should expect his charge soon." Chapter 27, The Silver Standard. Itachi patiently waited for his foolish little brother to exit the Forest of Death. There were other family members of Konoha genin waiting by the underground tunnel that led out of the forest as well. Earlier, there had been a real crowd gathered for the results of the test, but when the genin who had failed to conquer the forest course had been herded out, many people had left when the genin they'd been waiting for had appeared, whispering words of encouragement about next year to them as they left. It was nice to get outside and be in the fresh air. And he looked forward to seeing his younger brother again and finding out how he had performed in the trials so far. But he couldn't fully enjoy the nice weather and the opportunity to be the first one to greet his sibling. After months of chasing down paperwork and staring at dead-end leads, his father had released him from the unpleasant task of trying to research Naruto's background. While Itachi had been hoping that his father would lose interest in Naruto, the way that he'd dismissed Itachi from his investigation didn't feel right. Fugaku had been frustrated at the initial lack of solid information, and even more frustrated as Itachi had failed to find anything further. For him to suddenly drop it was unusual and out of character. And it made Itachi worried. Worse, over the past few days, he'd noticed his father meeting with a few older Uchiha. They were all skilled and loyal members of the clan. Normally Itachi would be pulled into whatever project Fugaku had in mind as well, but this time he'd been excluded. "What are you up to, father?" Naruto pouted and unhappily trudged along the eerie tunnel that ran underneath the Forest of Death and would end somewhere outside of it. The corridor was low-ceilinged and musty-smelling and wasn't well lit. With all of the other teams far ahead, it was almost like Team 7 was walking alone. Kakashi-sensei probably had engineered it that way so that they wouldn't be overheard. After staying back, and exchanging some words with an Umbu, the silver-haired Jonin had slowly led them into the exit tunnel and set Sakura to detailing their adventures out in the forest. The pink-haired girl faithfully recounted the events, going through their entry to the course, the fight with Orochimaru, the Otonin attack, the Cuba possession episode, and ending with their arrival at the tower. The things that had happened while Naruto had been lost was news to the blonde, and all that happened while Sasuke had been napping was news to the Uchiha. Then Kakashi had Sasuke explain himself. The Uchiha didn't have much to add to what Sakura had said, as he'd been unconscious most of the time and did little more than fight Orochimaru. All he'd really had to say was that the reason he'd tried to fight the false Kusunin was that he hadn't imagined that she would have been a serious challenge. Should you ever encounter Orochimaru again and seeing how he's marked you, it's unfortunately likely run, the Jonin advised Sasuke. That goes for all of you, and your classmates and comrades, too. He is an exceptionally dangerous rogue hunter and very few Konoha Jonin can hope to stand up to him. He's really that dangerous? Sakura asked, wringing her hands. Yes, Kakashi nodded. Even Hokage-sama would have trouble defeating him. Naruto shuddered and dug his fists into his pockets. I hope Kakashi-sensei's wrong and that snake guy never shows up again. Really? Sasuke muttered, sounding very dubious. Orochimaru was once Hokage-sama's greatest student, the Jonin informed him. And in addition he is a half-demon. Naruto blinked. A half-demon what? Have they covered Hanyu in your lecture classes yet? They've been mentioned every now and then, but never discussed in great detail, Sakura answered. Ah. Kakashi was quiet for a moment before giving an explanation. Half-demons Hanyu are exactly what they sound like, the result of a human mating with a demon. All manner of demon species can produce offspring with humans, but the general rule is that the more advanced and intelligent the demon race, the more likely it is to successfully create a child. They're fairly rare as there are enormous prejudices against them among both humans and demons. In Orochimaru's case, his mother was probably raped by a reptile demon, most likely a species of venomous naga, and he was abandoned shortly after birth. Many attribute his betrayal of the village and sociopathic behavior to his demon blood, but as plenty of pure-blooded humans can behave the same way, it's really impossible to say for certain if that's true. Okay, Naruto decided, I really don't like this snake guy at all. Are Hanyu allowed to become demon hunters? Sakura asked. There's no law against them, Kakashi shrugged. They aren't very common, you're more likely to hunt one down that's gone mad than meet one as a ninja. Unless you travel to Kumo, they have a reputation for recruiting Hanyu, among other things. Do Hanyu go mad often? Sasuke inquired, sounding fairly curious. It's hard to say, Kakashi shrugged. The only time you really hear about one is when it's snapped for some reason or other. Otherwise they just live in obscurity. I really can't say if their reputation as unstable beings is in any way justified. What is it? Sasuke grunted. Either they're dangerously unstable, or they aren't. Life is rarely black and white, Sasuke, the silver-haired man said. There is a wide variety of kinds of Hanyu and no one is studying any of them. Naruto frowned in thought, and then yelped when he walked into an impressive cobweb that hung off the wall and ceiling that had been hidden in a dim stretch between light fixtures. He stopped to flail ineffectually until he got most of the sticky, tickly stuff off. And then, belatedly noticing how far ahead his team had gotten, he sprinted to catch up. Well, enough on that. Kakashi reached over and brushed a bit of spider silk still sticking to Naruto's hair. Now it's your turn. My turn. Naruto repeated stupidly. Yes, his sensei nodded patiently. Tell us what you got up to when you were on your own in Field 44. Oh, Naruto gulped as the moment he'd dreaded since the ending of the tournament finally came. Well. The giant snake was chasing me, so I ran and I ran and I ran all over the place until I finally lost it. But then, I was lost, so I tried to find my way back, but I kept almost running into people and getting turned around more. And? You just lost the snake. Sasuke snorted. You didn't kill it. Nah, I just outran it until it got tired of chasing me, I guess. Naruto shrugged and laced his fingers together behind his head. There was no way he was telling them how he'd really gotten away from the snake. That information was for Kakashi-sensei only. He would have liked to tell Sasuke and Sakura, but Sasuke was an Uchiha and the Uchiha were all about hunting down demon-y things and stabbing first and asking questions later, if ever, and Sakura would just go running to Sasuke if she found out in hopes of getting his attention. So, while I'm lost, I find these Takinin, Naruto continued. The same ones that made it to the tower. I was wondering why they kept glaring at you, Sasuke grumbled. What did you do to them? I tricked them, Naruto replied smugly. They got their hands on a second white box and I devised this awesome strategy and stole it. What awesome strategy would that be? Sakura asked warily. You didn't use that awful, gender-bending, naked henge, did you? No, no, no. Naruto hurriedly assured her. There was a girl on that team, it totally wouldn't have worked anyway. Well, what did you do, then? Sasuke demanded. More Kagebunshin. Naruto cheerfully nodded. I made a couple of Kagebunshin and disguised one as an animal, because the Kunoichi was really into animals. After I distracted her with the fake animal, I distracted all the rest with the human Bunshin, and in all the chaos I stole one of their boxes and some of their food. That's stupid, Sasuke decided. How did such morons make it to the tower with the right boxes within the time limit when they fell for something so ridiculous? My plan was awesome. Naruto insisted. You're just jealous because you ended up being totally useless. Sasuke made a sort of growling sound and made as if to punch him, but he was stopped by Kakashi in a sudden bout of crippling shoulder pain. You need to relax, Sasuke, the Jonin warned. That mark will get in your way even sealed if you let your emotions get the best of you. I need to remember to set you up with some appointments with Anko. Naruto eyed the sour-faced Sasuke warily for a minute as he kept walking, and wondered just when the tunnel was supposed to end. Please continue, Naruto, Kakashi invited. Okay, The blonde genin hesitated, taking a few extra moments to find his place in his story. So, I was still lost in all, and I kept looking for the bastard and Sakura-chan. And when I finally thought I was getting close, I ran into that crazy Lee guy fighting that creepy Doso guy. That creepy Doso guy used his sound power and I fell out of the tree and I don't really remember what happened next. You don't remember? Sasuke snorted, probably still mad about Naruto calling him useless. Not really, no, Naruto lied. Sorry Kakashi-sensei, I'll tell you the truth later. Much later. And, if I forget to, probably never. Sensei, was all the things that Orochimaru said about the Kyuubi true? Sakura asked anxiously. Yes, the Jonin nodded after a moment's thought. As far as I'm aware, everything he told you is fact. So Konoha has a test where genin and foreign genin run around in a forest that has an evil skeleton of doom in it. Naruto asked, rather unnerved. Well, I've never heard of anyone being possessed, or even seriously affected, by the Kyuubi remains before, Kakashi answered. Aside from passively fueling the forest, I haven't heard of the skeleton doing anything. Really? Naruto gulped, feeling even more nervous. At that moment, they finally reached the exit of the tunnel. Kakashi pushed the doors open, flooding the dim tunnel with bright sunlight that briefly blinded them all. When their eyes adjusted, the Jonin herded them outside and sealed the tunnel behind him. All of the other participants from the preliminary tournament had already left for the village, except for Team 10. They were only just leaving in the company of their famous, some said infamous, fathers. The only other people waiting in the clearing by the exit were Sasuke's almost creepy older brother, and two adults that Naruto guessed were Sakura's parents. All right, students, Kakashi sighed. Since two of the three of you will be advancing, I'll have to split you up so that you can properly train. I'll be focusing on Sasuke for the month, a colleague of mine will take care of Naruto, and Sakura. I'm afraid that unless you can find a tutor you'll have to engage in independent study as I don't know anyone offhand who would benefit you and has the time to train with you. Okay, Sakura nodded, accepting her fate and scampering off to her parents at Kakashi's wave. Sasuke grunted and skulked off to join his brother without waiting for any dismissal. A colleague of yours? Naruto repeated, curious and confused. Who's that? No idea, the Jonin shrugged. How's he your colleague then? The blonde sputtered. All Konoha ninja are my colleagues, the older ninja replied. Anyway, whoever he is, Hokage-sama specifically selected him as Jiraiya is still out of the village. He'll meet you at Iruka's apartment, so keep your eyes peeled for an Umbu. Okay, cool. Naruto turned to leave, but hesitated. Should I tell you all the stuff I left out now, or later? Tell your new tutor, Kakashi answered. He'll report directly to Hokage-sama, who I'm sure would like to know why you decided to take the direction you did in your match against Kiba. Run along now, I need to have a chat with Itachi before they leave. Gotcha, Naruto nodded and jogged towards the trail that led back to Konoha. See ya later, Kakashi-sensei. Another new teacher. Naruto pouted for a moment as he hurried along the trail, quickly bypassing Sakura and her parents who'd been ahead of him. Oh well, at least he's Umbu. That should make him awesome, right? So, how did it go? Itachi asked. Good, Sasuke answered. We got out of the forest early and my opponent wasn't too challenging. Mother and father will be pleased to hear that, Itachi remarked. I'm sure that there will be a special dinner to celebrate your progress in the trials so far. But don't let this go to your head, foolish little brother. There is still the final trial to complete. Will you help me train? The younger Uchiha asked, trying not to sound too overly hopeful. Won't your sensei be training you? He said he would, but he's always late for everything, so I'm sure that there will be plenty of time for me to train with you, too. Sasuke glanced around, noting Sakura's departure and Kakashi and Naruto talking about something. I want to do my best in the stadium. So long as your sensei approves, I'd be glad to help, Itachi said with a faint smile. Thank you, Sasuke almost grinned, feeling relieved. He knew that Kakashi was a powerful shinobi. The conflict in Wave had proven that. But his older brother was just as good, if not better, and an Uchiha. Why don't we go discuss this with your sensei? Itachi suggested. But fortunately it seemed that Kakashi was already on his way over as Naruto darted away back towards Konoha. Itachi-san, the silver-haired man greeted with a polite nod. A few words before you return home. Of course, the older brother agreed. Is this about Sasuke's training schedule? Indirectly, Kakashi said. Sasuke encountered Orochimaru in the Forest of Death. Itachi went very still and tense. Orochimaru forced a curse mark on him, the Jonin continued. It hasn't yet activated, and it was sealed as soon as Sasuke reached the tower by an Umbu. I see, Itachi spoke at last. Thank you for informing me. Do you know if Orochimaru is still in the area? Umbu patrols have swept the village and the surrounding forest and haven't located him, Kakashi answered. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything. I understand, Itachi nodded and gripped Sasuke's shoulder with one hand. I'll keep on my guard. The two older ninja exchanged a few more words, mostly about Sasuke's training, before parting ways. Sasuke rubbed at his shoulder and worried as he and his older brother walked back to Konoha and home. He remembered what the Umbu had told him about the curse mark and he anxiously wondered what his brother thought of it. Don't worry, Sasuke, Itachi said quietly as they walked side by side. I'll protect you, from whoever I have to. Sasuke frowned worriedly. Who else would be after me besides this Orochimaru person? Uchiha Shisui hopped from roof to roof, using his fabled speed to sweep back and forth over the neighborhoods that lay closest to the training fields. He looked just like any other Uchiha of the military police on high alert for the trials. But Fugaku-sama had given him a special task for today. His sharp eyes scanned the crowds, seeking one individual in particular. When he spied the second, smaller wave of people returning from the Forest of Death, he activated his Sharingan to better spot his target. It was very important that he locate the boy as quickly as possible long before he returned to his home. And then he found him, and wondered why he'd bothered to activate his eyes. The boy almost glowed with his bright blonde hair and even brighter blue and orange clothing. The only way the boy could have been more visible was if he had flashing lights floating over his head. What an idiot. Shisui dropped down to the streets and tailed the boy, focusing his power on him. In addition to his speed, Shisui was known for his Sharingan skill. Of all the Uchiha, he was one of the most skilled compellers in the whole clan. If he was close enough, he could even influence a person without making direct eye contact. Whenever a mission called for a rogue hunter to be brought in alive, Shisui was always chosen to do it. Whenever a criminal organization needed destroying, Shisui alone could be sent to have the criminals at each other's throats until the gang imploded. Shisui was fast and he was subtle. It would be child's play to get Naruto off the busy streets and into one of the quieter village districts where Fugaku-sama and the others would be waiting without the boy realizing it until it was far too late. Mangetsu sat on the roof of the apartment building, watching the entrance, and waited. Every few minutes, he pulled out a watch and checked the time. The longer he waited, the more often he checked the time, and the more unhappy that he became. Surely it didn't take that long to walk from the forest of death to this apartment building. Finally he couldn't stand waiting any longer. He tucked a seal marker into a sheltered part of the roof and then moved on in an outward search spiral. If he somehow missing locating Naruto, he could warp back to the apartment building and pick him up from there. When or if he found the boy wandering the streets, he'd just follow from the shadows until he returned to his home. If Naruto wanted to take his time walking back, or if he wanted to stop and get food from a restaurant, the Umbu had no plans on stopping him. All the canine masked Umbu wanted to do was find the boy and ease his mind. It was too hard to sit still and wait for him to turn up. So he bounded from rooftop to rooftop and searched. Naruto spaced out as he wound his way back to Iruka's apartment. He took a slightly longer way than he normally would have so that he could hopefully avoid the others from the tournament in the Forest of Death. He didn't want to worry about dodging questions from old classmates on how he'd beaten Kiba. Also, he was a bit anxious about this Umbu he was supposed to be meeting for his month of training before the final trial. Kakashi didn't know this guy personally, so Naruto had no idea what sort of person he'd be meeting. Sure, the Hokage had picked the guy, but what if he was a sucky teacher? Or not all that friendly? Or if he hated ramen? What if the guy had issues working with a kid werewolf? I wish I could have met the guy before now, or even if I knew the guy's name. There was also the anxiety about how much trouble he was in. Would he get in trouble for using his lycanthropy powers in acquiring his team's white box from the Takinin? Would he get in trouble for getting possessed by the Cuba skeleton? Would he get in trouble for how he'd defeated Kiba? Naruto wasn't all that eager to find out. I can't wander around forever, though, he knew. It's not cool to keep people waiting. It sure pisses me off when Kakashi-sensei does it, all the time. With a sigh, Naruto gathered his nerve and looked around. And found that he wasn't where he was supposed to be. Not even close. Instead of being somewhere near Iruka's apartment building, it looked like he was in a maze of alleys that ran behind a bunch of stores in a commercial district. He could sort of hear the streets on the other side of the buildings, but he couldn't see any quick way out to them. Unless he screamed at the top of his lungs, it was doubtful that any civilian would hear him. How the heck did I get back here? Naruto wondered as he wrinkled his nose at the stench of mildew and garbage. Whatever. Time to leave. Naruto gathered chakra to the soles of his feet and prepared to scamper up the wall to the roof. A hand roughly caught the back of his jacket collar, stopping him cold. You aren't going anywhere just yet. Fugaku-sama wants a word with you. Naruto flinched and turned around to find an Uchiha behind him. He looked a bit older than Sasuke's brother and he was dressed as a military police officer. The Uchiha's eyes were red with lazily spinning tomo orbiting his pupils. Who? The boy croaked weakly, his heart racing with sudden fear. The strange Uchiha jerked his head and Naruto slowly turned to see several other Uchiha emerging from a side alley a few yards ahead. There were 3 of them, but only one really caught his attention. The man had a stony face frozen in a permanent scowl. It looked like he'd never cracked a smile once in his life. Naruto had a feeling that he was the leader, and this Fugaku-sama person. The frowning man walked right up to Naruto, and the other adults formed a loose circle around the boy in orange, making it impossible to escape. Fugaku stared down at him impassively, his black eyes boring into Naruto with almost physical force. When Naruto was sure that he'd flip out and try to tear his way free, the man spoke. I don't like anomalies and you are most certainly an anomaly, the man grunted. Ever since Sasuke first brought you to my attention. Naruto flinched as he suddenly placed the name Fugaku as Itachi and Sasuke as dad's name. This scowling sourpuss was the jerk that Sasuke looked up to so much, yet never paid him any attention. This jerk was the leader of the Uchiha clan who'd been trying to find out where Naruto had come from. Icy panic filled his veins and he felt paralyzed. You have been a vexation to me. You have wasted countless hours of my son Itachi's time trying to determine where you came from. You have been a potential threat for months and caused me great concern for Sasuke's safety. But recently there have finally been some clues as to your origin. And now to settle things once and for all, I just need to perform one test. Fugaku removed a large knife from a leather sheath in his waistband. The handle was too decorated for the knife to be intended for battle and the blade itself was etched with patterns along the dull edge. The metal gleamed brightly, it almost looked white, and it didn't smell like steel or iron. The panic that had paralyzed him now made Naruto try to bolt, but several sets of hands clamped down on his shoulders and upper arms, and one hand gripped the back of his neck and squeezed so that he felt unable to move. I know you have had the lesson on werewolves, so you know of the various ways to test one, Fugaku said as he took Naruto's forearm and pushed back the sleeve. The easiest way and the most widely employed method is silver exposure. When my father taught it to me, he called it the silver standard. Without another word, Fugaku pressed the flat side of the silver blade against Naruto's bared arm skin. Even though Naruto knew that the metal was cold, it was like a hot cup of tea was being touched to his skin. It was hot, uncomfortable, prickly, and starting to get painful. Naruto bit the inside of his cheek to keep from yelping, but when the knife was pulled away it revealed red irritated skin with the beginnings of blisters. As I had feared, Fugaku muttered, sounding almost regretful. If only Sasuke saw that photograph sooner. Photograph? It took a minute for Naruto to realize what the man was talking about. Then he recalled that Sasuke had seen his mother's picture. And this was Konoha. His parents were known here. There was no place to hide. He was screwed. It's a shame, Fugaku grumbled, looking even sourer than before as he sheathed the fancy knife. What must be done is clear. It's unfortunate that your mother was too weak-willed and her family too gutless to do it themselves, but the Uchiha will clean up their mess. You are dangerous, not just to my son, but to the village at large, and the Hokage refuses to acknowledge this. Since he has grown too old and blind to see what is for the greater good for the village, we shall act for him. The Uchiha holding Naruto shifted their grips subtly so that there was a hand holding his hair and pulling his head back to bare his throat, and there was a hand over his mouth so that he couldn't scream. Hold still, Fugaku instructed calmly as he drew a smaller silver knife that had an oily glint to it, and I will make this as quick and painless as possible. It was like a nightmare that Naruto had suffered many times in the past had come to life. The knife moved to his neck in slow motion. Adrenaline surged through Naruto's veins and he struggled desperately against the combined strengths of 3 adult ninja. I don't wanna die, I don't wanna die, I don't wanna die. Naruto tried to shift shapes to become a stronger, fiercer animal, but it happened so slowly. The knife tip touched the side of his neck. Naruto sank his fangs into the hand covering his mouth and bit down as hard as he could. The blade pierced his skin. Naruto bucked with all of his strength. The knife slipped. Instead of slashing his throat open, it slid down his neck and then sideways across his shoulder, cutting ever deeper as it moved. It hurt like nothing Naruto had ever experienced before. It was 10 times 20 times worse than just feeling silver on his skin. It burned like molten lava and it spread inward through his flesh and outward over his skin. He was screaming even before the Uchiha that he'd bitten managed to tear his wounded and bloody hand free. Mommy! Mommy, help me! Mommy! The Uchiha were angry, snarling at him. A second blade jutted into his side while Naruto kept flailing, more out of agony now than anything else. Naruto got one hand free and tried to claw at his attackers, but he was burning and nauseated and his vision was growing gray and blurry. There was shouting. A bang. More yelling. But it all sounded muted, like someone had stuffed cotton into his ears. His struggles slowed. He felt so weak even as he burned and another oddly distant pain bloomed along his hip. He was yanked suddenly and it felt like he was being torn in half. And then he spiraled into the dark of nothingness and it was over. That's it for part 9. Thank you for watching and see you on the next video.